My name is C. Rodney Dow. I'm a Danbury political and community activist and a historian. My age is 99.
Wow.
And I've left some information at the local history room on paper. Now we're going to the
Digital.
now we're going to the oral.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. All right. So,
Did you record that?
It's all being recorded now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Why don't you tell me, were you born in Danbury?
No, I immigrated to Danbury in 1955 from Vermont.
Okay.
But as a historian in Vermont and also here, people often that I meet think I'm a native because I know more about the history of the city than the natives.
What brought you to Danbury?
Better job,
What were you doing?
landscape designer.
Oh, okay. And is that how you made your career here in Danbury?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. That's good. Why Danbury specifically?
My wife came from New York City, and I was born in Vermont.
Mm-hmm.
And so we decided to move, and it said, where shall we move? But coming down Route 7, heading towards New York, we passed through Danbury, Connecticut, down through Park Avenue, where that beautiful new Park Avenue had just been built. And at that time, there was only 30,000 people in Danbury. Now there's 90,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
It was beautiful. The fair, Danbury Fair, was still going underway.
Mm-hmm.
The interstate had not been built. It was beautiful. So we said, why not live here?
Wonderful. So where did you live when you first got here?
So we found a house on Bennett Place, which is off Pleasant Street, right close to the Park Avenue School, so my children could all walk from the house to the school.
Mm-hmm. How many children do you have?
4.
Do they live in Danbury now?
I have 1 in Brookfield, 1 in New York City, and 2 in California.
Oh, wow. So once you moved here, you established a landscaping business? Once you moved here, you established a landscaping business, landscape design?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And you did that for how long?
I did that, and I had some other jobs going at the same time. And I was doing that up until the point when, at age 62, I retired. So, in effect, I worked 40 years of my life, and then for 40 years I have been self-employed as a retired person. 40 years working, 40 years retired.
Wow.
And so many people die premature death.
Mm-hmm.
And here, 40 years of retirement.
That's amazing.
Now my goal is to be a centenarian.
You're so close. When is your birthday?
December 28th.
All right. Okay.
But my goal used to be 100. But now a friend of mine just died on 9th Avenue, a native Danburian, at age 109.
Oh, wow.
So I said, I might as well move my goal up a little bit.
Yeah, sure. It's another, 10 years? You can make it. You're spry. So you moved here, you got your landscaping business. Did your wife work here in Danbury too?
And she came from New York City, as I mentioned. Yes, and she worked for a while as a medical secretary.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How long would she do that? Here in Danbury?
In
Yeah.
Danbury.
How long did she work as the medical secretary?
For X number of years, and then she died a premature death.
Oh.
Because she was a heavy smoker, and her family had a history of cardiac problems.
Mm-hmm.
So she died a premature death at age 60.
Oh, wow.
So why should she die at age 60 and I live 40 more years?
Wow. That's a hard question.
So you never know
Yeah, yeah,
when your number's going to be called.
that's right.
I could get hit by a bus in traffic, or you could.
Right. That's true. So, tell me, you said you've been a political activist here in Danbury?
Yeah, I wanted to read something here about
Sure.
my activities.
Sure, I would love that. Go ahead.
In July 1955, I entered the FCI. You know what that is?
I do not.
Federal Correction Institute,
Oh, right, of course.
the big government federal prison
Right.
in Danbury. In July of 55, I entered the FCI. I was a player with the Bard Parker, which was an industry at the time. I was a player, softball, for the Bard Parker softball team in Danbury, part of the industrial fast pitch league that was going on at that time. We were playing a game against the FCI team, a league member. We passed through several clanging steel doors. Inside the prison walls was a well-kept softball field. Our coach warned us about the prisoners. Our coach warned us. He said, they like to slide into a base and gash your ankles with the sharp steel cleats that are on the soles of the shoes. In those days, it was steel cleats on the shoes. Now it's plastic. As prisoners, they think they have nothing to lose. What can they do? So they won the game, and we learned a few things about what it is like to lose your freedom, to be a prisoner. 1 month later, in August, this is also the year 1955, I learned what it is like to lose a battle against the forces of nature. The Still River flows through Danbury. Are you a native?
No.
From New York?
No, I'm from Norwalk.
From Norwalk? No, but you're, yeah, okay. So the Still River flows through the center of Danbury. It flows north like the African Nile River. On our planet Earth, most rivers flow south. In 1901, the native hatters, had so polluted the river that a Brookfield farmer's cattle refused to drink from the water. He sued the city of Danbury. The charge was sewering, contaminating a public waterway, the Still River. By the year 1955, the river had had enough. It struck back at the city with a vengeance, with a record-setting flood, the big flood of 1955. There's photographs and everything in this library about that. The big flood of 1955 that paralyzed the city of Danbury for 2 weeks. There's a small section of land in Rogers Park that has been undisturbed since the last ice age 12,000 years ago. It's a swampland, jungle of thick trees, invasive bushes, and 12-foot-high invasive Phragmites that are on the federal and state list of invasives that move in from Asia and Europe and take over and kill all the native plants. There's a small section, undisturbed in Rogers Park. Also in that area, there is snakes and uncounted aquatic and terrestrial species. Connecticut's largest snake is the 7-foot-long black racer. In the 1600s, the first settlers arrived from Norwalk. They named their settlement here Swamp Field because of swamps and fields, and so it remained until the community activists, Mr. and Mrs. Dan, had other ideas about naming it Danbury. The first land trust in 1970 in Danbury was named the Swampfield Land Trust. Years later, new controllers, new people took over the land trust and changed that name to the Danbury Land Trust. Their infantile rationale was it was difficult to explain to new members just what Swampfield meant. Like, that's difficult to describe that. Infantile was the attitude. So society goes up and down. The year 1970 also saw the creation of Arbor Day in America. That year, Danbury built the middle school in Rogers Park. In back of the school, there was a small island of native wildflowers. The water there and the Rogers Park pond came from a spring in Terrywall Park that flowed under Mountainville Avenue into Rogers Park. A young woman, a science student, a Miss Santos, Portuguese name, daughter was a science student in the Rogers Park Middle School. Standing on the ice in December, her father, Mr. Santos, built a simple wooden bridge to the island so that the science teacher could take the class there in the springtime to collect terrestrial and aquatic samples, which would provide hours of educational delight under the microscopes in the school laboratory on rainy days in Maine. One day, the science teacher, noticed in September a little colony of gorgeous cerulean blue fringe gentians. They are rare because Homo sapiens, we, human beings, have usurped all of their habitat. 2 senior citizens, I was one of them, have protected this wildflower island now for 20 years from the invasive ravages of human and foreign species. This is the island. This is the bridge that Mr. Santos built going onto the small island down in Rogers Park. The fringe gentians. A famous American poet wrote this about the fringe gentians. They come late, they blossom in September. Most flowers are in May and June and so on. Fringe gentian, thou blossom bright with autumn dew and colored with heaven's own blue, that opens when the quiet light succeeds the keen and frosty night. Thou comest not when violets lean, or wandering brooks and springs unseen, or columbines in purple dressed nod over the ground bird's hidden nest. Thou waitest, these flowers wait, and they come alone. No other flowers are blossoming at that time, September, when woods are bare and birds are flown, and frosts and shortening days portend the aged year is near its end. Then doth thy sweet and quiet eye look through its fringes to the sky, blue, blue, as if that sky let fall a flower from its cerulean wall.
That's lovely.
So that's it.
Now, how did you come to be a part of protecting that island? How did that happen?
Well, as I mentioned here, a science teacher saw that and spoke to another person who was interested, who conducted wildflower walks in Rogers Park. She told me. So I went down, and another senior and I have been protecting that, so it's now there for 20 years.
What do you do to protect it?
We go there every week, and with a weed whacker, keep the foliage, keep the flowers and everything at about a foot level, so that all of the invasives that come in, the high ones and so on, are cut off. Mm-hmm. So we control them in that manner all during the year.
Oh, wow. Now, you mentioned the flood. Do you personally have any memories of the flood?
Well, the flood, yes. When it happened, let's see.
That was right around when you first
Yeah,
came.
I was working part-time at Bard Parker, a surgical company in Danbury, when it hit. And for 2 weeks, they were out of business. All they could do was clean up the mess.
Yeah.
That was when that flood hit.
Did it impact you at all? Your home or anything like that?
No, my house was up on a hill. There was no problem there, but it was downtown Danbury. And as a result of that, they changed the whole system in Danbury and put up the walls down in the main street section to protect the current. And they were the flood forced them to control the river, which they have done.
Right. Do you have any other specific memories about when you first got here, or like your younger days while you were here, that you'd like to share with us? Or even some, any more recent memories that you'd like to share about Danbury?
Let's see, there's one item that might qualify. In connection with the hatting industry
Sure.
in Danbury. I wrote this letter to the editor, the Danbury News-Times.
When was that?
And let's see, this was about 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Hats, Danbury hats. Danbury was the hat capital
Right.
of the country.
Mm-hmm.
The hats were made in Danbury of rabbit fur. Australia, the hatting industry around here exhausted all of the rabbits around here. They had to import them from Australia.
That's fascinating.
Australia had millions of rabbits, which were killed and skinned. The fur was scraped off and shipped to Danbury, to the hat factories, Danbury and Bethel. Coning hats was difficult because the fur was stiff. Company moguls hired a chemist who experimented and found that mercury, the chemical mercury, softened the material and made the process easy, but there was a heavy price to be paid. Hatters were directly exposed and contaminated by the vats of mercury mixture. Insidiously, their neurological system commenced to suffer. They could no longer work because they developed what came to be known as hatter's shakes. The expression mad as a hatter was one description for this debilitating medical condition. Time passed, love passed, life passed, but the hatting legacy remained in the form of mercury poisoning that does not pass. It's in the ground. The city of Danbury acquired a plot of land that was permeated with mercury from a former hat factory. Grant money was secured to pay for an experiment. Genetically altered cottonwood saplings, small trees, were planted. Their roots would suck the mercury from the soil, a process that's called phytoremediation. Months later, they could be replaced with new trees. Now, and this was down near North Avenue, is where this experiment took place. Now, a legal immigrant family of woodchucks is living there underground, sucking the roots. The question is, will the mercury poisoning legacy strike again? Will a famous Danbury animal activist stage a rescue before the little furry paws of the woodchucks start a neurological quivering and shaking? Will the $55,000 EPA research grant cover liability and ancillary ramifications? That's part of the heritage from the hatting industry in Danbury.
Did you own a hat? Did you wear a hat?
In those days, if you didn't wear a hat, they looked at you like kind of funny, like, are you trying to sabotage the city?
Mm-hmm. What kind of hat did you have?
And I got a hat. A friend of mine worked in the Lee Hat Factory, and he got me a hat that I wore.
Was it a fedora? What kind of hat was it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Most of them were made, as I said, from rabbit fur. But then, of course, there was beaver hats. You've heard of those, made from beaver skin. So it was a big business until the automobile was invented. Now the people could sit inside an air-conditioned car. They didn't need any hat or any protection or anything. Gradually, the hatting industry disappeared, a victim of society.